All right, here we are. So first of all, gentlemen, thanks for taking the time here. We really appreciate you guys really amplifying what you're doing and really telling the story for our culture. So we'll start off just a little bit about really hearing from your point of view. When did you first learn about Juneteenth, and what did that mean to you growing up?
I can start. Actually, I learned about Juneteenth pretty late. I was born and raised in New York City, and it wasn't something that we celebrated as a family. So I kind of came to it a little bit late, but late for me is probably 50 years ago. so, so I mean, I've known about it for a while.
Yeah, for me, I would say kind of more sooner than later. Being kind of in this position, having this platform, and to be able to understand a lot about the African American community, about the history, is something that I always kind of was intrigued about. And learning about Juneteenth, it was, for me, it was something I didn't know, and I felt bad that I didn't know about it earlier. So now that I am made aware of it, just trying to find ways to make sure that our younger generation and generations to come, know barbed wire as well.
That's such a good point. I'm born and raised here in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and I can honestly say I didn't learn about the race massacre history until I was in high school. And the way that I actually learned about it was going to Juneteenth celebrations. And I was like, oh, I thought we just get together, we hang out. And so it was at that point that I started to learn even about Juneteenth, but also our own history here in Tulsa. And I wanted to give you guys space as well to talk about that. When did you guys start to learn about Greenwood, and what prompted you guys to start to work on the project together?
Go ahead, Stanley.
Okay, so I made a film that premiered about a year and a half ago called Boss, and it was a history of Black entrepreneurs. And we told the Greenwood story in 10 minutes, and we were all crying that we weren't able to give it its full due. But there were a lot of stories that we had to cover in this film. So since then I've been dying to do something more substantial on Greenwood, and so really this is a chance to do it. So I'm just so happy that we're going to be able to do this.
Yeah, man. For me, I was in Oklahoma for I was there for about 12 years. And every year I had basketball camps that I would do in Oklahoma City, and I do them in Tulsa as well, because I want to get the whole Oklahoma, bring all the kids together. And then when I first went down to Tulsa, people were mentioning Black Wall Street, Greenwood. I didn't really understand exactly what that meant or how substantial it was to the city of Tulsa. And then as I got older, I understand a little bit more about the effect that it had on the city, African Americans, on businesses, on the culture in itself. I became more intrigued about it. Wanted to kind of go down there. I drove down many times to see where it was, see where Black Wall Street was. And then recently just been, I would say, just blessed and thankful for Stanley giving us and giving myself an opportunity to be able to tell the story the right way, give people a chance to know and understand how important it was. So
one thing I think that's important, and that we'll at least touch on in the film, was that Greenwood wasn't alone. I think one thing we say in Boss is there were over 100 Black towns in the West. That This was something that African Americans did to try to get some peace and dignity, and accumulate some kind of wealth and just be left alone. That they looked at, let's go west, let's go where there's land and we can form our own communities without racism. And so, Greenwood was probably the most successful. But there were a series of these Black towns that existed, all throughout the West.
Yeah.
I think that's so important that we continue to highlight that. One of the things that you bring together there, Stanley, is this history is not a standalone moment. This is not, a one-time thing that's happening here. These movements have been built, time and time again over the course of history. And I just think, going back to what we were saying, learning about this right now and how all this is connected is so important. And so for you, Stanley, as you've done so many great films and really examinations of Black culture and history throughout the years, what type of advice would you give everyone right now around Juneteenth and around this movement that's happening in Black history and Black culture?
A great question. I mean, I think what's important is that people who are out there marching. There's so many young people. I have 3 kids, and this is like the first time, really, that they've been involved in politics. We were up in Cape Cod when George Floyd died and was murdered, and we had just gotten here, and I have 21-year-old twins, and they said, we got to go back to New York. We got to go back to New York. We got to go back to New York, and we got to be part of the protest. So I think it's important that so many young people are becoming involved, but just know that it's not a quick struggle. The struggle takes time. And it's really important to understand that, in the civil rights movement of the 60s, right, when you see those dogs being sicked on people and the violence, they didn't know that they were going to win, right? They didn't know that they were it was gonna, change the world, and that the civil rights law would pass and the Voting Rights Act would pass. They didn't know that, but they were out there fighting, and so it's a long, hard battle. Power is never given up without struggle. And so, I think young people just have to know that they will change the world. One of my friends sent me, I told him my kids were out there, and he sent me a text, tell your kids thank you. And that's what I want to say to all the young people that's out there right now. Thank you. It's your movement. It's on you, but just stay with it. Stay with it. Stay with it. Change needs to happen, and you are the ones who need to make change.
I love that. Thank you so much for those words. And really kind of piggyback on that, Russell, you mentioned the platform you have, and we've seen that you've been very vocal and involved in protests and demonstrations back there at home. How do you hope this work that you're doing now inspires the next generations?
Man, I really hope, kind of to piggyback off what Stanley said, is that I feel like it's my duty, and Stanley's obviously a lot older than I am, but I feel like it's my duty, not just as an African American male, but being in this position, having this platform to now be able to show and let people know that it's okay to stand up for what you believe in. It's okay to be able to sacrifice. It's okay to be able to stand up and be strong and understand how important your word, your movement, the youth movement is, because I believe that with my platform, I'm able to kind of reach that demographic of people and kids around the world to let them know it's okay to be able to stand up. It's a struggle. Like Stanley said, it's going to be a struggle. It's not just going to a snap of a finger going to change tomorrow. And I think just taking step by step, each step of the way, whether it's protesting, whether it's finding ways to be able to bring light to things happening in African-American history, whether it's doing things in the educational system, whether it's doing things in the community, whatever it is finding ways to be able to keep bringing light to every aspect of our world, and find ways to be able to help the youth out any way we can.
Right. I mean, again, I think it's their time. If you're 20 years old, look, you may have 50, 60, 70 years, 80 years more to live in this world. So you've got to make the world the way you want it to be, or try to make it the way you want it to be. And I think what's so beautiful about movements is it doesn't matter what you do, right? You could be unemployed. You could be a college student. You could be, you could be anything.
Yeah.
You could get out there and with your body and protest and say, I want change, and my body is going to be here in support of that. And so that's really important. It's not a movement of rich people. It's not a movement of college students. It's not a movement of poor people. It's a movement of everybody. And that's what I think, is so fantastic, about what's going on. When you see it on TV, you're like, amazing. I know when it first started, we were like, oh my God, everybody's out there.
And Stanley, it's crazy you said. I was having a conversation with my dad, and he was saying, because my dad and my wife and my brother, my family, we marched together in Compton about a week ago, and my dad, to be able to see it and to see me kind of marching and standing up for what I believe and standing up for justice, and to see not just myself, but the whole city, the whole world, to see unity. It's like, to me, that's like, it was like, gave me chills, because I never was a part of that. I'm always, in my mind, wanted to change every aspect of the world to make sure that, it was equal across all boards. But to be able to do that, to be able to walk, to be able to understand and see how powerful that can be was, to me, was amazing in itself.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the great things about movements. Like, you don't have to be a leader. I mean, I was around in the '60s a little bit. For especially in New York, the anti-war movement and some civil rights stuff. But I didn't have to be a leader. All I had to know was there was a march, and all I had to do was show up. And I think that's what's important. You don't have to be a leader. If you want to be, then you can be. But the main thing is to show up, because what we're seeing now, we all know about police violence. We're all close to it. We've all seen it in our families. We all have been affected by it. Personally, we can all sit around and tell our own stories about when the cops did this and that, but it's now's the time for it to stop.
Yeah.
And that stopping is just the beginning, because this is not, if our only problem were the police, we'd be okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's our problem, but that's not our only problem. And this is just the beginning. Our problem is racism in this country, and we've got to stand up and now and say no, and no.
Yeah. And Stanley, just to piggyback, I strongly believe that if we together and everybody's on the same page, that we can make change. And like you said, if you're a part of a movement, regardless of unemployed, employed or not, you can make change. And the time is now more than ever. And unfortunately, we've been able to see things happen to different people across the world, whether they're getting murdered or being unjust or not getting the fair treatment. But I believe that us as a community, we got to find ways to be able to now make that change by doing whatever it is that needs to be done.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's also, as we share these moments, right, of what's happening, everyone's paying attention now. I love the call out there, Stanley, in terms of, racism and stamping it for what it is. As we start to look at these, what thoughts do you guys have on how we continue the ball rolling? As you said, we have so many folks, specifically from the youth movement. I'm so inspired by them, to be completely honest. Everything that's happening here on the ground in Tulsa is truly inspiring, from the middle school all the way through the college students who are involved, as well as more and more of our Tulsans are getting involved. But I'm just curious, from your standpoint, how do we keep the ball rolling?
I think one of the things that's going to be really important is that different laws are passed, and different, systemic changes, and different laws are passed. And my own opinion is that it's not going to be easy, right? Because of the way this government is set up, it's not going to be easy to pass laws. So I think that when we have, a police reform bill that goes before Congress and it doesn't get passed, right, then we have to look at that killing of that bill as if they killed another Black person.
Absolutely.
And get back out on the street, and we can't they didn't pass the law. We gotta get back out on the street and hold people accountable. Yeah. And obviously, look, we've got to vote. And that's important. We're not in the next presidential election, there's not going to be a Barack Obama. Right. It's not set up that way. Yeah. But that doesn't mean it doesn't affect us. Yeah. Right. We've got to get out there and vote. Yeah. Right. It's so funny, because so many times young African Americans are just like, oh, I don't vote. But we're the ones who are most affected.
Absolutely.
Right. We were voted into slavery. We were voted out of slavery. We were voted into Jim Crow, and we were voted out of Jim Crow. We've got these people in the government now who don't care about us. And so we've got to at least get people in there that have some kind of empathy and some kind of belief that we are all, one nation, that we're not trying to pit people against each other, which is what's happening now. So I think that, to me, that's really important. And for people who are politicized, and in this, one thing that they can do is, as the election comes up, is work to get the vote turned out.
Yeah,
get the vote turned out. I remember we went to Philly in 2008 when Obama was, in the first Obama election, on election day, to help turn out the vote. And the first people we talked to, we saw some brothers on the corner, right? They were just hanging out on the corner. And we said, "Are you guys going to vote?" They said, "Don't worry about it. We voted already." And it was 8:00 in the morning. We said, "We already voted. we got that. We got that." And so we've got to do the same thing. We've got to do the same. We control the election. I mean, you know what I mean? The Black people control the election.
Absolutely.
Let's vote.
Yeah, I agree, Stanley. I believe just having a conversation, voting is a huge aspect of kind of how we can change. And I feel like my duty is to be able to get people educated on why you should vote, understand what you're voting for, understand why you should vote. Just because my personal experience, like me growing up in the inner city of Los Angeles, there was no outlets, whether it's high school, to teach us how to vote, to be able to understand why you should vote, to be able to understand how it can change from years to come. And I think that's where I want to be able to make change in today's society of educating our people of how to vote, why you should vote, understanding what you're voting for, so we can now be unified and we can vote and make change in today's society.
Yeah, I want to say too, I mean, look, Black folks out there, the powers that be don't want you to vote. Yeah. They don't want you to vote. I saw there was a speech, I hope somebody digs it out, that Trump made after the election, where he said, to all his supporters, he said, I want to thank Black people
for not voting.
They didn't turn out.
Yeah.
And that's how I got elected.
Yeah.
Thank you, Black people. Yeah. Probably the only time he ever said anything like that in his life. He's not going to be thanking us after this election.
Nope.
No.
Yeah, and the power of that connectivity of our people, our culture in various places, whether that be from Los Angeles all the way across the country to, Durham, North Carolina, who also has a Black Wall Street history. But as we start to connect everyone and learn more and more, just as you all are saying, this is not something that is unique to one place. This is happening across the country over and over. As those as we call them, the cultural mayors around here, like those cultural mayors needs to start talking to one another. How can we facilitate that conversation? And amongst the platforms that you both have and the stories that you have been able to tell, what are some of those pieces that you encourage, those cultural mayors, like what are those things you encourage them to start talking about right now?
Russell, you want to take this?
Yeah, I believe obviously, voting is a huge part of it. Kind of how Stanley mentioned, finding ways to be able to fix our police system. I believe that it's a huge problem and a huge problem in our system today because me growing up and me understanding when you see a police officer, the face I get when you get pulled over.
Right. We all got it.
Get it. It's just natural. And like nobody else can understand what that feeling is. Nobody understands that because it's just how we were raised. It's to see, police, no, we don't know what's going to happen. We are afraid for our lives. And now being able to see everything via social, via cameras, you're able to see now the things and how it's changing our community, how is it changing the outlook of how we look at the police. And I don't want my kids growing up to see the police as somebody that it's bad for them, to see them as somebody that's going to potentially have the potential to be able to kill them, to be able to murder them. And that's something that we need to change. I believe that racism is also a huge pillar that is going to be step by step to be able to change. And in our world, it's not going to be easy. Like Stanley said, there's going to be times where we may have a bill that don't get passed. So now what are we going to do as people? And I think that's where we need to make sure we sit together and be united and understand, like, listen, there will be times where everything's not going to go as smooth sailing, because that's not how the world works, and that's not how this world is built. The government, every aspect of it. And I think, to me, those three things are huge in today, and finding ways to be able to lift those three things up to be able to change our world is important.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, white people need to talk to each other, and I think that's another important thing. We need to encourage white folks to talk to each other. I mean, we're not the problem. We don't have any control of anything. The definition of racism is a group that has power, using that power against another group that doesn't have power. And so we don't have that power. And I saw a picture of a protest, and a guy was holding up a sign that said, "Talk to your racist aunt," and I love that. That's what white folks need to do. They need to talk to each other.
Yeah, they didn't get it from nowhere. It didn't come from nowhere.
Yeah, it doesn't, nobody's born a racist.
Right.
Nobody's born hating Black people. And I think what happens, my understanding, I'm never there, but, as white people are eating their Thanksgiving dinner, you have old Uncle Bob, going off about Black folks.
Yeah. And
the rest of the people around the table say, "Oh, okay, Bob, pass the butter." They need to say, no, that's not okay anymore.
Yeah.
That's not okay. And then, if that happens, then, the kids won't be taught that. And, the kid who's not born racist won't be taught that. And slowly things will change. And I think that's really, important. But we also have to have the will to change in this country. And I think that's important. And I think that's kind of what we don't have, with the federal government that we have now. They don't, so this government, you can change that. I remember I saw this speech that Malcolm X gave, and he said that this government can control. If this government wanted people not to hate Black people, they could do it.
Yeah.
He said, before World War I, we loved the Germans. And then during World War I, we hated the Germans. Then after World War I, we loved the Germans. Then during World War II, we hated the Germans. Then after that, then we love them again. And this all comes from the government. The government and this country has to have the will to change.
Yep.
And I think that's one of the great things that we're seeing out there with people out on the street, that it's, Black and white, Asian, Latino, everybody's out there, saying, okay, it's enough. Yeah. We're not, this is ridiculous. We're not going to survive this way. We don't want to be those people. And I think it's important that we somehow, get on that higher plane and say, well, who do we want to be? Who do we want to be? I mean, and I think that's one of the things that we have to think about. And white people have to talk to each other, and say, no, that's not, no.
Okay.
You can't say that anymore.
Yeah, totally agree. To me, it's very I stress myself, and I'm pretty sure, Stanley, you've been and learned a lot more and know a lot more. But sometimes I sit here and just figure out how much and where I want to involve myself. How much can I do to be able to change and make sure that it's heard around the world, and to be able to see all races, all ages of people marching and protesting and understanding that we've had enough. Understanding that African American community is always been hurting, but right now it's hurting at an all-time high, and it's something that to be able to see the rest of different races to be able to come together and protest and march for something for the greater good gives me some enlightenment that things will be moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I'm like you. I'm very positive. I see those kids out there. My kids made me drive them back to New York so they could be in the protest, and I didn't want to. I'll admit that. It's like, no, we just got here. But I'm so proud of them, and I'm so proud that they feel that this is something they had to do. So, young people out there, go ahead. It's your struggle now. Go ahead. But it's I'm really proud of y'all.
Brandon, Stanley's talking to us young people. Just so
Oh, that's both of us, huh?
She's talking to us.
I'll take that. I appreciate it, and I take the charge and appreciate the wisdom. I was just sitting here thinking about how we're talking about, you can get involved at any level. There's so many different things people can do. And I thought about my youngest, one of my younger cousins. She sent me a text and was like, hey, I'm thinking about posting this on Instagram. And it was essentially like a Black Lives Matter post. And it was moving. Like I almost teared up in that moment, knowing that like next generations of even my family are jumping in at this rate. And so I wanted to pivot here a little bit to think more about like the future. And as we have these conversations, this is a great project that you all are working on here that's not only telling a great story. I'm biased because I'm from Tulsa, but it's also
I'm a little biased. I grew up in Oklahoma, so I'm more your side, Brandon.
But as we were saying, like this is part of the national story. This is our nation's history. Are there any other projects or things that you guys have in mind or that you're thinking about?
Russell?
Me personally, I am very focused, and obviously, again, Stanley, thank you for allowing myself and my team to be able to be involved with you, because it brings a greater light to the actual story. And honestly, Brandon, I'm just solely focused right now on this project as it pertains to what's going on in today's society. There's obviously other projects I'm working on, but this one to me is the most important. And like Stanley said, telling it the right way and making sure people understand how important it is, how it impacted, not just back then, but how it can impact our future, or how it can impact our now. And that's something that I've been focused, and I was just happy to be able to know that first Stanley was on board. It was a call that I was super excited about to hear that call from my team. It was like, Stanley's on board. I was like, oh, okay, it's go time. It's time to turn it up, and I was super excited about that. And now to be able to sit here and have a conversation with Stanley and be able to talk to him and understand his point of view and the things he's knowledgeable about is, for me, is as exciting. And that's something that I'm working on now, just trying to stay focused on this one.
Yeah, I'm really excited about this project, really excited about working with Russell. I'm trying not to fan out. When this is over, I'm gonna go tell my wife, Russell Westbrook knows my name, Call my son and tell him Russell Westbrook knows my name. Maybe I get a little tap for like an hour or so from my son, So, so obviously this is a really, really important project. I should say that, PBS just re-released a whole bunch of our films that are free. You can stream them at pbs.org. The Black Panthers Vanguard of the Revolution, which I recommend everybody to see. It's a different view of who the Black Panthers were. Freedom Riders and Freedom Summer. Freedom Riders is just a film that I think is really important in so many ways. If you see it, you'll see it. It won 3 primetime Emmys, which is like, was amazing. So I didn't see that, but we just finished a film for Netflix on crack, which will come out late summer, early fall, and we're trying to get it out there, because one of the things that it does is it talks about how the drug epidemic, the crack epidemic, in the 80s, led to the war on drugs, which led to more money for policing, and where it led to the first wave of militarization of the police that we're seeing, the ultimate of that now. You see these guys look like, the whatever they call those guys from Star Wars. They got plastic, armor and all that. So we're working on that. We're working on a massive 4-hour series on the Atlantic slave trade. And the economics of the trade. It's not about slavery so much as about this trade that changed the world we live in. Working on a project on Frederick Douglass. Working on a project on Harriet Tubman. Working on a project on Attica that we're starting to shoot. Those are all those are all funded projects that we're working on now. It's kind of a crazy day, and right this moment, there's really a lot of interest in Black content, because, TV and movies have played such a role in stereotyping African Americans and also marginalizing African American, stories. So we're trying to ride that interest. But the other thing I should say is that we have what we call the documentary lab, and we work with first-time filmmakers, and that's 10 years old. And we work with just filmmakers of color all over the country. And we have like 80 graduates and who've graduated with 80 films that are, have won every award in the industry. We won a couple of awards at Sundance last year for a film about lynching. And so, we're just trying to, they let me put my foot in the door. So I'm just trying to kick it open.
Knock it down, Stanley. Knock it down.
Yeah, and just let some other people through.
Knock it down.
Yeah, we can.
Well, Stan, that's dope. Me personally, I want to commend you and thank you because to be able to not just think about these shows, think about these different type of docs or stories you want to tell, but you're doing that because you know how important it is to our community, to our people, to people like myself, like Brandon, to younger generation. And personally, I just want to thank you for that because, without people like yourselves and people that know how important it is for us to be able to see things, whether it's on different networks, on TV, it's definitely, it has impacted me to be able to inspire me to be able to do more things. So I definitely want to commend you and thank you for that. So.
Thanks. I mean, one of the things we look at is these stories like Tulsa and other stories as a way in. You might not want to pick up a book and read a book about Tulsa, or at least not at first. That takes a big commitment. But to sit down for a few hours and watch a film is a different commitment. And we try to make these films as entertaining as we possibly can. When I'm making them, I'm thinking about my kids. Like what would my kids get bored? What are they going to watch? Who've got a social media attention span. So we try to make them as entertaining as we possibly can. And what we look at it is these are just great stories. That nobody knows, that haven't been told. Like Tulsa's a great story. I mean, it's a great story of Black people who go west, and form their own community, and there's film footage of them and the pride that they have, and Black people riding horses and herding cattle and stuff. It's like incredible, and they form this community, and it's hugely successful. And then, in one night of violence and wilding, the white community turns on them and burns the whole thing down. But then Black folks come back in Tulsa and reform, and say, no, this is our community, and they rebuild. And so, that's a great story, and so that's the story we want to tell.
Yep.
Awesome. I too commend you, Stanley. I'm so inspired by your work. My wife and I reconnect often about learning about each other's childhood and the way we grew up through the movies that we watched coming up, and it really is one of those ways of sharing history and telling story. So important is through that medium. And so one of the things as we get closer to our time here, I was going to ask how you spend your time here in quarantine, but it seems like Stanley's going to blow all of us out of the water. So I'm not even going to throw that one out.
No. I actually got into baking. I was baking all this stuff, and I just had to stop. Like my family finally begged me, like, stop! You gotta stop. This is ridiculous. So like I stopped. I'm like, no, I can't. I gotta do something else. I can't do it. So they call it COVID 15. So everybody's come out 15 pounds heavier.
What about you, Russ? You pick anything up like baking?
What? No, not baking. I've cooked a lot more than I've in years, but no baking. I've stopped cooking. My wife is tired of me in the kitchen. Just kind of, she don't like me using the pots and messing up the pots. There's certain pots you're not supposed to use. Certain, don't scratch the pots, and there's so much rules. And I say, okay, well, that's fine. This is why I don't cook. So other than that, I've just been working out and hanging with the kids. That's about it.
Well, thank you so much, gentlemen. I appreciate you guys making the time here and really sharing your words of wisdom, as well as championing all things culture, all things progressive to community. It means so much, not only to me, but everyone else across the nation.
I'm taking a photo of the screen so I can send to my son. I can say, you know who that is?
If you guys wouldn't mind, is there anything you want to share? I want to give the space if you guys want to share anything that we didn't ask, or if there's anything about the docuseries that people could expect or you'd want them to know.
No, I think we said it. We're really happy to be doing it and excited to be doing it. Excited to be doing it with Russell, and we just want to get it on. We want to make sure that we get it on for the 100th anniversary of the massacre in Greenwood.
Yeah, I agree. Same with myself. Just I'm just thankful for the opportunity in itself, and to piggyback off what Stanley said, I'm just ready to get it on and getting the information and making people aware, to be able to give them a film or something that they can look at and be proud of.
Well, thank you both for always using your superpowers for good. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Brandon.
Thanks so much. Thanks.